Calaroga Shark Media.
Don't go calling what Marc Maron does an interview show. Hi, I'm Johnny Mac with a robust Sunday edition of Daily Comedy News. More from Maron with The Hollywood Reporter. Maron says it's not an interview show. I needed to be in that show, and it was instinctual to insert myself into the conversations. It took some people a little time to adjust to that. They were used to interview shows, and I've never, ever seen it as an interview show. They asked if Maron envies any of the $100 million plus deals that some other folks have gotten. Maron said, "We did all right. Definitely well enough for us to live the rest of our lives, but those kind of deals come with extreme responsibility. Why would I want to start scrambling now?" The Hollywood Reporter writes, he'll mock the podcast industrial complex, but Maron's also happy to play the mayor. Between a meeting in July and a phone call 2 weeks later, Maron guested on no fewer than 9 podcasts. The conversation changes to unnamed podcasters, but the Hollywood Reporter says there's little doubt he's talking about Rogan, Schultz, and Theo Vaughn. Maron says how they became the arbiters of what comedy should or shouldn't be is an effing nightmare. This anti-woke idea around free speech with comedians is BS. Whether they knew it or not, they were being used by the right to push this anti-woke agenda, which is now disassembling every progressive policy. They're responsible. I can't let them off the hook for that, even if some of them are kind of backpedaling now. As for the future, Maron says, my social life has really been the podcast mostly, and comedy clubs. I'll probably go back to AA meetings for a bit of support to not spiral out with the isms, as they call it, but I don't do dinner parties. No one invites me anywhere. I don't vacation with friends. I need to nourish more relationships. Does he want to be invited out more? Yeah, I won't want to do it, but once I'm there, I'll be good. I think that some people like to have me around. Maybe this is all the change talking. Maybe I'm just an old man yelling at the burning sky. Elf Cosmetics is catching heat for including Matt Rife in their latest campaign. People are bringing up Matt Rife's domestic violence joke from his 2023 Netflix special. I will be honest here, I had forgotten about that joke. People on social media are mad at Elf Cosmetics for including Matt Rife, who they claim does not respect women. One person wrote, "Bruh, not Matt Rife. I love y'all as a brand, but Matt Rife is not a good person." Nikki Glazer told Variety that society glamorized not eating. Nikki said the most notable thing you could do was to not eat or follow a diet, and I was like, okay, finally I'm good at something, but it started killing me. This next part's pretty serious. In college, she said, I didn't want to get better. I didn't have any reason to because I was like, my life sucks. I kind of went off to college to die. It was my path to suicide, pretty much. Because I looked so freakish, I just turned my personality up real high because I needed to make friends. I was more funny, more outgoing, and always telling stories. I was louder than I'd ever been in my life. She started to get feedback about how funny she was. There was a poster for a stand-up showcase. A friend took the sign and ran into my dorm room, slammed it on my desk, and said, "You're doing this." She started doing research, came across Sarah Silverman. Glazer said she gets to be herself and you want to be friends with her, and she also seems like a nice person, but then she gets to say these really weird, out-of-context, terrible things, and you still like her. That fascinated me. She eventually winds up on Last Comic Standing and says, I thought I had arrived. I thought things were starting to come in, and they didn't. I had to move back home with my parents. She did smaller rooms, appeared on some podcasts, started participating in roasts, and said, I didn't want to do another roast because I was approaching 40 and I didn't want to get called an old horse-faced whore over and over. It hurt my feelings every time I did a roast previously. Then she heard about the Tom Brady roast, and away we go. She pitched herself as the Tom Brady of roasting and says, I don't even know what that meant. But I stand by it now because as I researched Tom Brady, I learned how he was kind of underrated. He was good, but like the 105th draft pick. But he trained perfectly and optimized every moment of his life to make sure that when he stepped out on the field, he could be as good as possible, and he didn't take any shortcuts. I always thought that talent was something you were born with or not, but I've learned you can be great at things if you just work harder than anyone else. Not sure that's true. Part of it, you got to have the charisma, you got to have the look. Not sure I agree there, Nikki Glazer. Nikki says, Tom Brady changed my life. The next day I started seeing headlines, started being recognized everywhere. Things went back to normal within 3 days, but it was 20 years to being an overnight success. Yep, you hear that a lot with comedians. Glazer says, there's a lot more interest in me from the industry over the past couple of years. Now I'm in a position where people want to develop things around me. One of her dreams is to be on White Lotus. Leanne Morgan tells Time people want authenticity and they want to learn who somebody really is. I think that's my advantage. People accuse her of doing a fake accent because they can't pinpoint where it's from. Her first husband had suggested she get diction lessons. She says, I know it's thick, but I think it's made me stand out. Nate Bargatze says her accent is her accent, and that adds the flavor. As recently as 2018, club owners were turning her way. She says, club owners said, we love her. She doesn't get drunk and fight in the parking lot, but we're not having her back. She can't sell a ticket. She's happy that she got famous in her 50s when I'm too tired to do something awful. Billboard talked to Sebastian Maniscalco about Pete Correale, the Gator. Pete hates that nickname. Jim Breuer had tagged Pete with that nickname when Pete was the co-host on Jim Breuer Unleashed. Paraphrasing here, it's because Pete has big teeth and he would all of a sudden come out of nowhere and bite you with, he was like a sniper on the show. Jim would tell 10, 12-minute stories and Pete would come in and say one line and get the bigger laugh. Pete's fantastic. Sebastian said, we've been doing the Pete and Sebastian show about 12 years. We started it out of the sheer enjoyment of calling one another on the phone and laughing. I said, you know what? We should record these phone conversations because if we're cracking up, I'm sure other people would crack up. Pete's more of a beer and peanuts Neanderthal, and I'm more of a wine and cheese guy who likes the finer things in life. That's a great description of Pete Correale. At first, we were just doing audio. He'd be in a car outside of Starbucks ripping Wi-Fi off the Starbucks, and I'd be in a hotel room in Denver. It's not guest-driven. We've had maybe 12 or 13 guests on our show over the course of 12 years. It was just two guys talking. We're not making a dime, but it's always been a passion project for us. The LA Times talked to Charlie Day about shaving off his beard for a gag in the current season. It's Always Sunny is having a renaissance. It's like they turned back time. This feels like a vintage season. I don't know what happened. A lot of people think it's because they did the podcast and it got them revisiting the earlier seasons. But, you know, what are we up to? Season 17? I don't know. The Ireland season was off, but COVID, and last year was okay. There were a couple funky seasons, but this season's on point. Of shaving, Charlie Day said, it was horrible just to see how old the man is under the beard. Once you take off the eyebrows, that's when it really starts to look freaky. We had that idea and we knew we had to shoot it last because if I was going to shave, that'd be the last thing we were going to shoot. Right after we wrapped, I went on a little vacation with my wife and son and I rarely got recognized, which is funny. Every now and then people who are fans of the movie Pacific Rim, because I didn't have a beard in those movies, they'd be like, hey, where you been? Were you not working? The funny thing is I couldn't unlock my cell phone with that look because I look so different. All right, let's click on this. Vulture did a list of the best comedy specials of 2025 so far. This was last updated on August 6th. Let's just fly through it real quick and see what they're into. Marc Maron Panicked. Yep, I have that at the top of my list for this year. Steph Tolev's Filth Queen. Didn't do it for me. Atsuko Okatsuka's Father was okay. I liked her previous special better. Mike Birbiglia, The Good Life. I just don't enjoy the Mike Birbiglia specials. I liked it 25 years ago when he just did stand-up. But I get if people like Birbiglia. Brent Weinbach's Popular Culture is on YouTube. I've not seen that one. Vulture writes, for every new cohort of clubby punchline comedians and truth-telling trauma explorers, somewhere a weirdo rises. In this case, it's Weinbach doing a bizarre smattering of impressions with no coherent design, except that they're all odd mashups and off-center angles, regularly designed as setups with little payoffs. That sounds like my kind of special. I will have to get to that. I also have to watch Barbosa. I also have to watch Jim Jeffries. On Dropout, Cameron Esposito's Four Pills. I haven't seen that because it's on Dropout. I do like Cameron. They have Bill Burr's Drop Dead Years on Hulu. I didn't think that was good at all. Rosebud Baker's The Mother Lode on Netflix. I didn't enjoy that one because of the back and forth between the two different sets. I get the gimmick, but it didn't do it for me. Roy Wood Jr., Lonely Flowers. That's way back in January. That one was pretty good, right? All right, so that's Vulture's list of the best so far. I might as well open up mine real quick since we're talking about it. All right, ready? Top tier. Mark Twain Prize, Conan O'Brien, Shane Gillis, ESPN Monologue, Tom Segura, Bad Thoughts, Mark Maron, 4, Tyers, 5, Justin Willman, Magic Lover, Dusty Slay, Bert Kreischer, Brett Goldstein, Sarah Silverman. Voice Mag's been talking to folks at the Fringe. Susan Harrison said the Fringe has definitely gotten bigger and more expensive as the years have gone on. That means my approach has been to wait for 6 years until I could afford it again financially, but also in terms of energy and time spent preparing and self-producing. I keep saying this every time I do these Fringe stories. The Fringe just sounds like a nightmare. Why does anyone go? It just sounds terrible. You're staying in like hovels, spending all your money. I don't get it. For what? A mention on the back end of a Summer Sunday Daily Comedy News episode? Is it worth it? Her show is Should I Still Be Doing This? At the Gilded Balloon Appleton Tower Pip at 7:40. Eric Idle spoke to The Guardian. They think in the Python TV shows and movies, he seems to be enjoying himself the most. Eric Idle said, some things in Python were very enjoyable and some were not. Holy Grail was cold and miserable. Sometimes that makes it funny. One of the worst things you can have in comedy is enough money. Python was quite a lot of arguing and fights, and good work is often like that. The best thing about showbiz is when it's over. I think if you're enjoying yourself, then you're not acting or giving, you're just having a good time. Well, that's not funny. What was his favorite project? The Ruddles and Spamalot were both just fabulous times. One of the things I talk about in the show, I call mock and roll, because we're all the same generation. The art school kids went into music and we went into comedy. My theory is that Python is the first group of mock and roll because we ended up in a Hollywood Bowl just like the Beatles, and I think the second group in mock and roll was SNL. On the first show I hosted, John Belushi impersonated Joe Cocker to his face. They sang together, and there was something magical about that. Eric Idle, are you happy to be captured by AI for posthumous performances and royalties? Idle said, they don't pay royalties. I always felt we ought to protect our images after I saw that tacky commercial with Fred Astaire and the vacuum cleaner. I feel very bad about that, so I felt that the Pythons ought to have done something to protect our image in a way that's appropriate, but I don't think there's a way that's appropriate. I have had my image done in one of those extraordinary machines where 40 cameras capture you from every angle. It was for a film they wanted to make, but it worries me. I don't trust AI. I mean, look how many times you have to correct a word. It completely misreads you. ChatGPT writing essays really bothers me. The point is to find out what we think, not what the machine thinks. And that is your comedy news for a summer Sunday. If you'd like the program without commercials, if you're on Apple Podcasts, click that banner. It says uninterrupted listening, and for $5 a month, which is like 17 cents a day. And listen, Scott Beckett, I know you're too cheap to give me 17 cents. I don't even get the full 17 cents. Apple keeps 30%. So what's 30% of 17 cents? I don't know. I'm not going to do math. Let's say, what is that like? 5 cents? So there's 11 cents left. Now, that math didn't work. Leave it in. So there's like 11 cents left, and then I have to split that with my partner, Mark. I'm getting like a nickel from you, Scott Beckett. Click the banner. Uninterrupted listening. Just do it, man. See you tomorrow.